So welcome to our program, Ezgi.
Hi, Amber. It's really nice to be here with you.
Our podcast. Well, in your new book, which is an excellent book, The New Spirit of Islamism, you examine the relationship between Turkey's Justice and Development Party, Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood, and Tunisia's Ennahda.
My guest is Ezgi Basaran,
and you
a
say
Turkish
that gaining
journalist
power
academic
rather
with
than
St.
spreading
Anthony's College
Islamist
at Oxford
ideology
University
has become the
Ezgi
core
has just
objective
published
of
a new
these
book
groups.
called The New Spirit
But
of
then
Islamism,
we saw what
in which
happened
he
in
examines
Egypt
Turkey's
in
ruling Justice
2012
and
and then
Development Party's
in
influence
Tunisia.
over the Islamist
We
Ennahda
saw what
Party in
happened
Tunisia
with Ennahda.
and the Muslim
They've
Brotherhood
both been
in
pushed out
Egypt.
of power. Egypt, of course, very bloodily so. So has this model then failed?
Well, the main question, I mean, the main puzzle that I wanted to explore was, what do Islamists, contemporary Islamists, want? That was my question. So, and the answer was not, I mean, contrary to many presumptions about Islamists and their transnational ties, they don't want to go ahead and build an, utopic ummah, but rather they want to be successful. It's a very neoliberal ethos. They want to gain power, become legitimate partners in whatever they do, and maintain power. So AKP had the formula for that. It's a very actually managerial in the sense that, for example, think of AKP in this relationship with Tunisian Islamists and Egyptian Islamists as the CEO of Islamism. So they run everything like a corporate, with a corporate mindset. Because of their experience in Turkey, they know how to retain power and how to, win elections and build alliances, and so that the ancien regime, quote unquote, would not deal them a blow. So they gave them 4 groups of tactics. AKP, the success formula was to how to win elections, how to build alliances, how to provide services to their constituencies, and cultivate a Islamic bourgeoisie. So this worked for AKP. This did not seem to work for Ennahda and Ikhwan in Egypt. But the reason is not solely dependent on the performances of the Islamists in question. For example, yes, Morsi was not a Mandela, but we haven't seen him do the things that Sisi accused him that he has done. So the reason that Muslim Brotherhood was ousted, was it because really solely dependent on 8 months of government of Muslim Brotherhood?
That's a very fair question. And in Tunisia, I mean, Ghanouchi did everything to sort of share power with the secularists. He kept building these very inclusive governments in which he took the back seat.
Yes, exactly. And, it was a very, I mean, he actually stepped down at some point, and it was again with the mentoring of the AKP, and all the election campaigns were done under the auspices of AKP's election campaigners and social media campaigners. So it was like AKP was a big brother, and but I mean, AKP could not have gone to Tunisia and rebuild the economy and address the questions of distribution of resources. It was I mean, since the independence, Tunisia has really structural economic problems, and it was not fair after a revolution to expect 2 governments or 3 governments to overcome it. And, you know, the reason it hasn't been overcome, these questions or the failures during COVID, was not because Ennahda was Islamist, was it? So we should keep the question clear about, I mean, do we want to know what Islamists do these days or what they want these days? Or are we trying to reduce the problem of, I mean, do they fail because are they, you know, essentially not germane to building democratic, you know, structures? I don't think those are really helpful questions, and they don't pose, you know, much analytical value, in my opinion.
Well, that's a fair point. And of course, you have to assess each case individually. As you say,
Exactly.
Tunisia has its very own specific context, as indeed does Egypt. And perhaps the fact that the AKP was as successful as it was is precisely because you had a history of democratic, however imperfect, governance of competitive politics in Turkey for far longer, right?
We have to realize that it was the first free election for both Ikhwan, because yes, Ikhwan since 2005 they participated in elections through independent candidates, but it was never free or fair. So they have to do a lot of negotiations and co-optations. And for Ennahda, to be honest, it was only after the ousting of Ben Ali that they could run as a party. So this was the first unique moment that we've seen them develop as a you know, institutional party. But for AKP, I mean, they are part of a multi-party system, the Turkish Islamist movement, for forever, since 1945, and they have a very different understanding of how to run a campaign, how to run a party. And AKP, if you compare it to other older parties in Turkey, AKP still, you know, as an institutional gigantic machine. It's the biggest political organization Turkey has ever seen.
Well, also, though, interestingly, in Egypt, I mean,
Yes.
you say this in your book, perhaps, however much, as you say, there are mitigating circumstances, if you will, for the failure of the Muslim Brotherhood there. It is also true that Morsi went too fast and sort of spooked people, right? And I
Yes.
recall very vividly that the AKP, I think you mentioned this in your book, sent people over to say, hey, you know, slow it down.
Yes.
And in Tunisia, you had the opposite phenomenon. And indeed, this has caused divisions within the party itself of Ghanouchi sort of being too reticent. But going forward, let's start with Egypt. I mean, the repression is absolutely horrible, obscene. What future lies ahead for the Muslim Brotherhood, and what role, if any, can Turkey play, given that Turkey now claims that it's not really helping them anymore?
Well, I mean, it's actually since 2019 that the AKP had a volte fast. The many Ikhwani people higher at the higher levels, trying to connect to Erdogan via, you know, certain channels, but he's not really talking to them anymore, and let alone it's been like 2 years ago, almost all of the broadcasting agencies ceased to exist in Turkey. Some of them went to Lebanon, one of them went to London. So there are not many activities in terms of actually activism. Ikhwani activism left in Istanbul or Ankara, but there are key figures within Ikhwan still residing in Istanbul because they're Turkish citizens now. So, but the relationship both with Ikhwan and Ennahda, even after Ghannouchi was threatened to be detained, AKP played dead, to be honest. And I was shocked because they were so into each other's business, and they were just helping. AKP people were helping, like almost every week. A delegation from AKP went to Tunis and tried to do business presentation for them. That was the extent of this confluence. But all of a sudden, that was such a U-turn. That was the moment that I realized there's no principled approach or ideological carpet underneath their feet, to be honest.
But this again speaks to what you say is the need to stay in power, that's the core objective. And obviously the AKP determined that in order to do so, it has to make these U-turns, correct?
That was actually one of the prescriptions that, they said to Ikhwan and Egypt and Tunisian Islamists to build alliances. If you would remember, Amber, AKP allied with certain figures over time in its tenure that really doesn't make sense. And when you put these people in a room, they would kill each other. It was the Fethullah Gülen movement, and now the hawkish nationalist, and previously the liberal intelligentsia. But the whole point was to just keep power. And that was the takeaway that they got, and they just diffuse it to other Islamists. This is how you do it, they said. And this new spirit of Islamism is really didn't start with the emergence of AKP, but late 1990s, and it's just a component of managerialism, like treating running a country like running a corporation. It has a purely neoliberal ethos and pragmatic mindset. And Tayyip Erdogan is the guy to employ this, as we've seen in the last 2 decades.
Are the Muslim Brotherhood, especially given what you described about Turkey turning its back on them and saying playing dead, as you put it, in face of Ghannouchi's plight, do they still feel the same enthusiasm for Turkey?
To be honest, it's they don't think about this model or Turkey anymore. They are in a survival phase. It is a point of crisis, but I don't see crises as like a death sentence. I think crises are iterations of turning points. Challenge. You evolve from crises. I would never dare to say that either Ennahda or Muslim Brotherhood will not reemerge from this. I am 100% sure that they will. And I think the ideology, the Islamist ideology, is extremely malleable, and they've learned a lot of lessons, including the ones that AKP provided, but also what happened with the recent oppression in Tunisia, and the ousting and the horrible massacres that they had endured in Egypt. They had their lessons, and they will reemerge. When it comes to party politics, they failed because they don't have enough experience. And only because they failed now as a Morsi government and Ghannouchi government, it doesn't mean that they lost the appeal that they had. Because party politics is different than charities and activism. When they decide to run as political parties, they have to act like AKP, and AKP doesn't act like an Islamist organization. You know
Okay,
what I
then let
mean?
me rephrase the question then. You're saying something very important here. You're saying that the movement cannot be reduced to the political component, the political party in and of itself.
Islamism, first, I mean, its, you know, essence is populist. You know, its essence is partly nationalist. So, I mean, it really is a matter of context and contingency, to be honest, to see how they would fare and how popular they are. But I don't think the era of, we don't see the end of history for Islamists, for sure.
Well, Ezgi, thank you very much for this very interesting conversation and for your wonderful book. And I hope to have you on this show soon again.
Thank you very much for having me on, Birin. Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of this episode of On the Middle East. I encourage you to buy Ezgi's book. It's called The New Spirit of Islamism, and you can order it online. For more in-depth coverage of the Middle East, go to our website, www.al-monitor.com. Thank you and goodbye.